Chapter 24. Black Minuet. In mid-August, despite statements made by Jim Williams' new witnesses, Judge Oliver denied Williams' motion for a new trial. Sonny Seiler promptly announced that he would take the appeal to the next level, the Georgia Supreme Court. A few weeks later, Spencer Lawton won re-election as district attorney, ensuring that he would be in a position to fight the appeal every step of the way. When the bad news reached Williams, he picked up the telephone and called Christie's in Geneva to place a bid on a Fabergé cigarette case that had once belonged to Edward VII. "It cost me $15,000, which I can ill afford," he said, "but it makes me feel better. I'm the only person in the world who's ever bought Fabergé from a jail cell." Increasingly, Williams used little tricks to convince himself and others that he was not really in jail. He continued routing phone calls through Mercer House and dictating letters that were typed at home on his engraved stationery. He sent several such letters to newspapers and magazines. One was published in Architectural Digest. It was a note praising the magazine for having run an article by the New York socialite Brooke Astor. "Delightful," Williams' note had read. "Brooke Astor has given us a delicious treat by recounting her early experiences with formal dining. Her recollections will serve as a lasting guide in the art of living well. My best wishes to our hostess. James A. Williams, Savannah, Georgia." Williams would not submit to the notion that he was in jail. "It's a matter of survival," he said. "I hypnotize myself so that, in my own mind at least, I am not here." Wherever Jim Williams' mind had taken him, it was clear that by early fall, his body would still be in jail at Christmas time. Once again there would be a gap in the social calendar the night before the cotillion ball, the night formerly reserved for his Christmas party. I recalled Lila Mayhew's lament back in May that she would have nothing to do that night. I also remembered what her black seamstress had told her, that the night of Jim Williams' party was the night the blacks had their debutante ball. The more I thought about it, the more I began to feel the urge, as an observer of the local scene, to know more about the black debutante ball and, if possible, to be invited to it. Savannah's blacks had been presenting debutantes at formal balls for nearly 40 years. The ball was sponsored by the graduate chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha, a black fraternity at Savannah State College. Naturally, Alpha Phi Alpha was the oldest black college fraternity in the country, having been founded at Cornell at the turn of the century. The fraternity was intended to be more than just an undergraduate social club, as its slogan "Bigger and Better Negro Business" suggested. In fact, the graduate chapter in Savannah, with 65 members, was more active than the undergraduate chapter, which had 15. The graduate alphas were representative of the upper level of Savannah's black community. Their membership included teachers, school principals, doctors, ministers, owners of small businesses, and lawyers. Notably absent were bankers, partners of the city's most influential law firms, directors of big corporations, and people with inherited wealth. The Alphas, unlike the members of the cotillion, did not belong to the Oglethorpe Club, the Golf Club, or the Yacht Club. One of Savannah's 3 black councilmen was an Alpha, but it could not be said that the Alphas or the black community as a whole were part of Savannah's power structure. The annual activities of the Alpha graduate chapter included a voter registration drive, a dance to raise money for scholarships, and a series of social events leading up to the debutante ball. The debutante ball had been the brainchild of Dr. Henry Collier, a gynecologist and the first black doctor to perform surgery at Candler Hospital. Dr. Collier got the idea for the ball in the 1940s when he heard that a group of black businessmen in Texas had sponsored a cotillion. He suggested to his fellow Alphas that they sponsor a similar ball in Savannah, and the Alphas agreed. Dr. Collier lived on Millsbee Lane Boulevard, several miles to the west of downtown. He had built his house in the 1950s when no one would sell him property in the exclusive white enclave of Ardsley Park. It was a rambling brick structure that had been added to over the years without any apparent plan. A modest front door opened onto a double-height entrance foyer with a grand circular stairway and a bubbling two-tiered fountain in the centre. A buoyant man in his late 60s, Dr. Collier greeted me warmly and ushered me into the family room off the kitchen, where we had coffee while, with great enthusiasm, he told me about his brainchild, the debutante ball. "Our first ball was set up in 1945, he said. "We presented 5 girls that year, and we set up a system that we used ever since. The members of the fraternity nominate the girls, then we have the members of the fraternity nominate the girls, and then we check them out to make sure they meet our criteria. The girls have to be of good moral character. That's most important. They have to be finished high school and matriculated into a school of higher learning. We interview their neighbors, their high school teachers, and the people in their church. For a girl to be disqualified, somebody has to have definite knowledge of misconduct, that she has left home, or that she frequents lounges and nightclubs, or has been in trouble with the police. If a girl has had an abortion, for instance, that would rule her out. Once the debutantes have been approved, we require that they attend what we call Charm Week, so they will know how to be gracious and the like. The alphabets take charge of that. That's what we call the wives of the alphas. Alphabets." Dr. Collier opened a photo album of memorabilia from past debutante balls. "This was our first ball," he said. "We had it at the Coconut Grove, which was a black dance hall. In those years, of course, public facilities were segregated, so none of the hotels would rent their ballroom to us, and the newspapers acted as if we didn't exist. We got coverage in black press only. That all changed with integration. In 1965, for the first time ever, we presented our debutantes to the ballroom of the old DeSoto Hotel, the same room where the cotillion had its ball the very next night. About that same time, the Savannah Morning News finally decided it could call blacks by the courtesy titles Mr., Mrs., and Miss, and they began to publish the names of our debutantes. I wouldn't say we've reached absolute parity with the cotillion yet, though. The society pages always report on the coming-out parties that precede the cotillion ball, the mother-daughter luncheons, the barbecues, the lawn parties, the oyster roasts, and what have you. But when we submit photographs from our coming-out parties, they don't use them. However," Dr. Collier waved his hand, "in time, that too will come." As Dr. Collier flipped through the pages in the photo album, year after year of debutantes flowed by. Midway through, around 1970, I noticed that a change in complexion had come over the girls. Almost all of the early debutantes had been light-skinned. Now there were darker faces too. The change coincided with the emergence of black pride, and it seemed that the alphas had responded by expanding the range of skin tones deemed acceptable for debutantes. Dr. Collier continued, turning the pages. "You know, some people say our debutante ball is just a copy of the cotillion ball. Sure it is. But you know, in one way our ball is better than the cotillion ball, and it tickles me every time. See this picture?" Dr. Collier pointed to a photograph of 15 debutantes in procession, their left hands resting daintily on the raised right hand of the escorts. "Know what they're doing there?" he asked. "They're dancing the minuet. They don't do that at a cotillion." Dr. Collier laughed a delighted, cackling laugh. That's right, we have them dance the minuet. How did you happen to choose the minuet? I asked. Dr. Collier threw up his hands and laughed. I don't know. I guess we must have seen it in the movies. We do it very properly, too. We hire a string quartet to play the minuet from Mozart's Don Giovanni. And let me tell you, it's quite the spectacle. I'd love for you to come as my guest. Then you'll see. Ooh, child, Chablis cooed when I told her I was going to the Black Debutante Ball. Take me with you as your date, honey. I would have been hard-pressed to imagine a more demented faux pas than to arrive at a ball with a black drag queen on my arm. I was hoping to be as inconspicuous as possible, and had already decided to go along. Sorry, Chablis, I said. I'm afraid not. Chablis saw nothing at all outlandish in the idea of accompanying me to the ball. I promise I won't embarrass you, baby, she pleaded. I won't cuss or dirty dance or shake my butt. I won't do any of that shit now, I promise. I will be the Lady Chablis all night long, just for you. Oh, I've never been to a real ball. Take me, take me, take me, take me. It's out of the question, I said. Chablis pouted. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I'm not good enough to dance in the clientele with them fancy-ass black folks. I hadn't even thought about that part, I said. But now that you mention it, the debutantes are all rather proper young ladies from what I've been told. Oh, Chablis looked at me archly. And what does that mean, if you don't mind me asking? Well, for one thing, I said, none of them has ever been caught shoplifting. Well, then they must be real good at it, honey, or else they don't know what shopping's all about. I'm serious. I cannot believe you are trying to tell me that out of 25 bitches, not one of them has ever stolen a bra or pair of pantyhose, 'cause I would not fall for that shit. All right, now tell me, what is so proper about them? They're all enrolled in college. Uh-huh. Chablis studied her fingernails. They do volunteer work for the community. Uh-huh. They go to church regularly and are known to be women of good character. Mm-hmm. None of them has ever been seen hanging out in bars or lounges. Child, you are beginning to work my nerves. Next you're going to be telling me that they all had their pussies checked out and they're virgins. All I know, Chablis, is they have spotless reputations. That much has been checked out. And not one of them has ever been known to be guilty of misconduct. Chablis shot me a sideways look. Are you sure these girls is black? Of course. Well, then all I can say is they must be real ugly. No, Chablis, they're pretty good looking, actually. Well, maybe. But anytime I want to see a bunch of stuck-up nuns parading around in white dresses, I can take my ass to church. I don't need no ball to see that. So you can forget about asking me to be your date, honey, 'cause I ain't going. Well, I guess that settles that, I said. The 25 debutantes had been culled from an original group of 50 nominees. Some of the nominees had declined the offer for lack of interest, or because they could not afford the $800 that being a debutante would cost, including the entrance fee, the price of a gown, the expense of hosting a social event, and incidentals. The prospective debutantes were invited to a meeting at the Quality Inn, where they were welcomed by members of the Alphabet Debutante Committee, and told what lay in store for them in the months preceding the ball. They would be expected to perform 10 hours of community service or write a 3-page paper on an approved topic. They would be required to appear at 4 minuet classes, and they would be obliged to host a coming out party with several other debutantes, to which all debutantes, parents, escorts, and members of the Alpha Debutante Committee and their wives would be invited. Charm Week was the centerpiece of the debutantes' indoctrination. The Alpha's wives, the Alphabets, taught classes in beauty and social graces, how to plan a party, send out invitations, set a table, introduce people properly, and write thank you notes. There was a session on table manners. Butter only the piece of bread you are about to put in your mouth. If food drops onto the floor, let it stay there and call for a waiter. If you happen to put a piece of gristle in your mouth, take it out with whatever put it in, a fork, a spoon, not your fingers. The debutantes were taught to improve their speech. Never say axe, say ask. Axe should be axed from your vocabulary, and get rid of words like and well. They were taught how to curtsy, don't pop up, come up slowly. How to sit gracefully, keep your legs straight, crossed at the ankles, never crossed at the knees. And how to walk like a lady. Back straight, shoulders up, arms to your sides, and no bopping. There was a set of criteria for the debutantes' escorts too. It boiled down to 2 requirements. They had to be high school graduates, currently in college or the military, and they could not have been convicted of a felony. Lining up escorts was not an easy matter. Boys tended to regard being an escort as more of a chore than an honour. They balked at attending the dance classes, renting a tailcoat, and going to so many parties where the chaperones tended to outnumber the young people. It was not unusual, therefore, for a debutante's boyfriend to beg off and for the debutante to be escorted by someone who had been pressed into service, an older brother, the son of an alpha graduate, or one of the current undergraduate alphas. At noon on the day of the ball, the 25 debutantes arrived at the Hyatt Regency for a dress rehearsal, carrying their gowns and garment bags. They went upstairs to a suite of rooms reserved as dressing rooms, and after changing they came down to the ballroom, where their fathers and escorts were waiting to rehearse the waltz and minuet. The Alpha Ball was to be a far more modest affair than the Cotillion Ball next night. There would be 2 cash bars instead of 5 open bars. There would be a breakfast served at 1 a.m. instead of both a dinner and a breakfast, and there would be minimal decorations. Nonetheless, the impending affair was not going unnoticed in the hotel. During the dress rehearsal, a cluster of curious onlookers peeked through the door, captivated by the sight of so many young black girls in flowing white ball gowns. One of the observers, a man in a grey suit and tan shoes, called attention to the cases of wine and liquor being unpacked at the far end of the ballroom. "Don't kid yourself," he said with a knowing air. "Blacks drink better whiskey than whites do. Dewar's, Johnny Walker, Seagram's, Hennessy, all high-priced brands. I have a theory about why that is." The man cupped the elbow of his pipe-holding arm and rocked back on his heels, glancing to his left and right to satisfy himself that the people standing in his immediate vicinity were paying sufficient attention. He then delivered himself of a particularly homespun theory. "Remember when black athletes at the Mexico City Olympics won a lot of medals and raised their fist in that black power salute? Well, that's when blacks in Savannah started drinking Dewar's Scotch, Seagram's gin, and Smirnoff vodka. If you look at those bottles, you'll notice that all the labels have medals on them. Blacks had suddenly began to identify with medals because of the Olympics, and that's why they started buying those brands. At about the same time, they also started drinking Hennessy cognac. The Hennessy label has a picture of a hand holding a mace, something like the Black Power salute. Johnny Walker Scotch has a man with riding breeches and a top hat, which represents the good life. All has to do with the symbol on the label. The best example of that is when school integration was taking place. That's when blacks started drinking Teacher's Scotch, which has a label showing a professor wearing a mortarboard. They go for the symbol, you see. At least that's the way I figure it. Toward 9 o'clock, the Hyatt's vast atrium lobby began to fill with guests arriving for the ball. A long, steep escalator carried a stately stream of formally dressed black couples, high above the potted plants and trees, to the ballroom on the second floor. Inside the ballroom, a string quartet played chamber music as 400 guests mingled briefly before taking their places at tables around the dance floor. One table of guests, knowing that no dinner was coming out, brought a carton of takeout snacks, which they started eating as soon as the lights dimmed. The president of the graduate chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha stepped to the podium, dressed in fraternity's colors, a black and gold tuxedo, gold dress shirt, and gold bow tie. He welcomed the gathering and bade the ceremonies begin. With the string quartet playing background music, an alphabet took the microphone and read the name of the first debutante. The debutante, escorted by her father, walked to a small platform, mounted the steps, turned towards the audience and curtsied. The announcer called out the names of her parents, her high school, her college, and the subject in which she was majoring. Then her escort arrived from the other side, took her hand, and led her down from the platform as the announcer read his name and those of his parents, school, and his major. One by one, the debutantes and their escorts were introduced in this manner. The girls each held a bouquet of yellow flowers, dotted with twinkling pin lights, powered by batteries in the handle of the bouquet. The escorts were dressed in black tie, wing collar, tailcoats, and white gloves. They held out their left hands behind them at the small of their backs, palm outward. At the end of the presentations, the Debs and escorts stood facing each other in two long rows that filled most of the dance hall. The hall was silent for a moment. Then the string quartet struck up again. The escorts bowed in unison, and the debutantes curtsied, the gowns sweeping the floor in a foamy surf of white ruffles and lace. The couples then joined hands and moved toward each other in a graceful promenade, dancing a lilting minuet to the strains of John Giovanni. The room seemed to rise and fall with each gliding step, almost as if they were skating. A current of exhilaration coursed throughout the room. Women held their breath, men stared in wonder. At the table of honour, Dr. Collier smiled from ear to ear, his joy shared by all. When the minuet was done, the debutantes danced two waltzes, first with their father, then their escorts. After that, the string quartet picked up and left, and the Bobby Lewis band began setting up for ballroom dancing. Dr. Collier had put me at a table with several alphas and alphabets. In the afterglow of the minuet, the alphas were beaming with pride. One of the women mentioned that the local chapter of the Lynx, one of the most prestigious black women's civil and social organizations in the United States, had expressed a desire to preside over the Savannah debutante proceedings, as they did in Atlanta and other cities. But the alphas would not give it up. When the minuet was done, the debutantes danced two waltzes, first with their fathers, then with their escorts. After that, the string quartet packed up and left, and the Bobby Lewis band began setting up for ballroom dancing. Dr. Collier had put me at a table with several alphas and alphabets. In the afterglow of the minuet, the alphas were beaming with pride. One of the women mentioned that the local chapter of the Lynx, the most prestigious black women's civil and social organization in the United States, had expressed a desire to preside over the Savannah debutante proceedings, as they did in Atlanta and other cities, but the alphas would not give it up. The AKAs want to sponsor it too, another woman said, referring to the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Although the woman was an alphabet, she was also an AKA, and it was clear that she had mixed feelings on the issue. This has been a long-running battle, she said. We feel women in the matter of the debutante We women feel the matter of debutantes should be our prerogative. It should not be left up to a male fraternity. The three alphas at the table laughed contentedly. If we gave it up, one of them said, we'd lose our status. We can't have that. The women exchanged silent looks. One of them pointedly changed the subject. My, isn't that a lovely gown? She said, gazing across the room. I turned and looked in the direction she was facing. An elegant black woman was standing at the entrance to the hall, peering uncertainly into the room as if looking for someone. She wore a slim-fitting dark blue evening gown, with a solid mass of rhinestones glistening across the top. I turned back to my table, but something about the figure in the doorway, something about the rhinestones and the way the woman held her head haughtily in the air, made me take a second look. Sure enough, it was Chablis. At the moment I saw her, she saw me. She took a deep breath, raised her chin a little higher, and started walking toward me at an exaggerated, regal pace. Her eyes were locked onto mine, and her lips were pursed in the fashion model style pout. She was playing the Lady Chablis, the Grand Empress of Savannah. The crowd parted for her as she approached, all eyes on her. I felt a sudden throbbing in my head and a ringing in my ears. She was not more than 5 steps away from me when she reached out a slender, gloved arm. I saw it as the Grim Reaper's scythe swinging towards me. At the last moment, she turned to the right and clasped the forearm of a muscular teenager standing next to my chair. "Young man," she said, "can you help me?" She looked plaintively into his eyes. "I am a damsel in distress, I surely am." The young man broke into a handsome smile. "I can try, ma'am," he said. "What's the problem?" Chablis turned her shoulders slightly so she could see me as she spoke. "I am here alone," she said. "I do not have the slightest idea who invited me. I am serious. My social secretary took down the information and wrote it on a piece of paper, but I left the paper in my limousine and sent the driver away. He won't be back till midnight." Chablis entwined both of her hands around the young man's biceps. "And you know how it is with us ladies," she purred. "We must never be alone. That is not acceptable in polite society. We must always have a man by our side." "I know what you mean, ma'am," he said. "So I was hoping you would stay by me until I can find my host," she said. "And you can quit calling me ma'am. My name is Chablis. What's yours?" "Philip. I'm an escort." "Ooh, child. An escort? You mean you work for one of those dating services?" No, he said. "See, all the debutantes here have escorts. I'm here with a debutante." "Oh, I see. Well, which one is yours, honey?" "She's standing in that group over there. It's my sister." Chablis drew back in surprise. "Child, you have got to be kidding me. You mean to tell me you're doing it with your sister?" No, Philip said. "You got it all wrong. See, Gregory, that's my sister's boyfriend, he flat refused to come to this thing. He said, 'No way I'm going.' So I got roped into coming instead. That's how it works sometimes." "Oh, now I understand," said Chablis. "You're just filling in, huh? You ain't got a real date tonight, do you?" She leaned closer to him, her hands gently stroking his arm. "Well, that's sort of true," he said. "Tell me something, child. Are you carrying a gun?" "A gun? No, I don't mess with that stuff." "That's good. I didn't think you did, honey. But see, one time I was out with a very high-class gentleman, and he put a gun to my head. So I always like to ask." "I don't think you'll run up against any guns in this ballroom," said Philip. "Everybody here is pretty law-abiding." "You mean you've never been arrested? Not even once?" "Well," Philip smiled shyly, "one time, sorta." Ooh, tell me. What was it for? Drugs? Reefer? 'Cause I am simply dying for a drag on it. No, it wasn't much. Me and a couple guys had a few too many drinks one night and we kind of, disturbed the peace a little. Ooh, I bet you did. I bet you could disturb that peace real bad if you wanted to. I can see it now, yes. Chablis shuddered with pleasure. She was now massaging Philip's arm. Oh, look, she said. Here comes Mother Superior heading this way. That's my sister, said Philip. Chablis loosened her grip on the young man's arm as a tall debutante in a lace gown approached. Chablis, this is my sister Lavella, he said. Lavella, this is Chablis. Lavella wore her hair in bangs and a page boy cut. Chablis offered her hand. We was just talking about you, she said. I understand y'all are going to college. Yes, I'm a freshman at Savannah State, Lavella said with a perky smile. I'm majoring in electrical engineering. Really, child? Electrical engineering? See now, that's something I wish I knew how to do. Last week my TV broke down right in the middle of The Young and the Restless, and all I could think to do was kick it. That didn't help none at all. 'Cause I never got to go to college. I had private tutors from kindergarten right on up. Don't matter now, though. I'm in show business, and I go on tour most of the time. Ooh, said Lavella. That sounds so glamorous. You get to travel to so many places. Travel does have its points, said Chablis. See this little handbag? Chablis held up a beaded clutch purse that twinkled in the light. I got it in London. Oh, it's so beautiful, said Lavella. And my shoes are from Rome. And let's see, the gloves are from Paris, and the gown is from New York. Gosh, said Lavella, we all been admiring your gown. It's exquisite. Well, honey, you too can have clothes like this if you play your cards right. I guess I better start saving up right now, said Lavella. Oh no, Chablis waved a finger. That is not the way to do it. Never spend any of your own hard-earned money on clothes and accessories. You gotta get yourself a man to buy all that for you. Chablis put her hands on Philip's arm again. You need to have a talk with that boyfriend of yours. What's his name? Gregory. The one that refused to come with you tonight. You tell Gregory to get ready to shake loose some of his coins and buy you gowns and finery. I can try, said Lavella with a rueful smile, but I don't think it'll work. Well then, I guess you'll just have to get all this shit the way I did, Chablis said. Shoplifting. Before Lavella could respond, Chablis took Philip by the arm and led him towards the dance floor. Excuse me, Miss Thing, she said. Me and Philip is about to disturb the peace a little. My first thought was to flee immediately, before Chablis had a chance to make it known that I was more or less responsible for her presence. She had a devilish smirk on her face. She was in her glory. She pressed against Philip's body as they spun around the floor. They moved as one, not so much dancing as writhing to the beat. The rhinestones on Chablis' dress sparkled in the light and set her face aglow. I recognized it as the dress I had zipped her into backstage at the pickup, the one with the slit up the back. Every so often the slit parted, revealing a whole haunch of calf, thigh, and buttock. So far, Chablis' antics had gone unnoticed, but I doubt that would remain the case for long, considering the deep backward dips she was now executing, not to mention the full-throttle bumps and grinds. I got up from my chair and headed for the door, but my path was obstructed by an exuberant Dr. Collier. There you are, he said. I've been looking for you. What did you think of the minuet? It was stunning, I said, and I want to thank you so much for inviting me. It's very kind of you. I've had a lovely time. Dr. Collier had me firmly by the arm. He was looking around the room. I want to introduce you to the man that taught him how to do it. He was the athletic director at Savannah State, John Miles. He taught him to waltz, too. I don't see him just now, but that's okay. We'll catch him a little later. I now had a chance of slipping away and insulting my host, or staying and becoming entangled in Chablis' inevitable wall. I now had the choice of either slipping away and insulting my host, or staying and becoming entangled in Chablis' inevitable devilment. I withdrew to the bar nearest the door to figure out what to do next. From that vantage point, I had a view of the dance floor and a clear shot of the exit. I ordered a double scotch. "And I'll have an apple schnapps," said Chablis, suddenly materializing beside me. She was breathing heavily and dabbing her face with a napkin. "What happened to your friend Philip?" I asked. "His sister cut in on us," she said with a look of extreme distaste. "But that's all right, honey. I'll get even with her. And anyway, I don't mind. The doll has her eye on a couple of the other escorts now. Soon as she starts a little liquid fire in her belly, she'll be getting into the cutting-in business herself. Big time." The bartender set a shot glass of apple schnapps in front of Chablis. She drank it in a single cup and coughed. Her eyes blazed. She looked out over the dance floor, and her mouth twisted into a leer. "Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Catch a escort by the toe. Ain't that how the little ditty goes, honey? Did I get it right, did I? Hey, Mr. Chauffeur, you listening to me?" "Forgive me, Chablis," I said, "but I think you'll have a hell of a nerve busting in here like this." "Ooh, I have made you angry, baby. You are some kind of cute when you get mad, child. You see, baby, the doll felt like being a little uppity tonight. And this ballroom happens to be the uppitiest place in Savannah at the moment. That's why she is here." "Well, let's not argue," I said. "I have no intention of insulting these people, and if you're planning to pull any more pranks, I'd appreciate if you fuck. I have no intention of insulting these people, and if you're planning to pull any more pranks, I'd appreciate it if you stayed well away from me. Better yet, why don't you just leave now before things get out of hand? You've had your fun, why ruin it?" "Oh, but the fun's only starting, honey." Well, it's over for me," I said. "I'm leaving." "Oh, no, you ain't, child. 'Cause if you do, I will read your beads right here in public, I promise you. I will scream and carry on. I will go up to that old man in that blue ruffled shirt you was just talking to, and I will tell him that you brought me here, and I'm carrying your baby, and that you have just walked out on me." Every hair follicle on my head began to tingle. I was too respectful of Chablis' sense of drama to dismiss her threat out of hand. She smiled and moved closer to me. "This is what you get for not bringing me as your date," she said. "But if you are a good boy, I promise I won't say nothing." "Just behave yourself, Chablis," I said. "Oh, I'll try, honey, but it ain't gonna be easy. Whenever I'm around high yellers, I get jumpy, you know what I mean? And this place is loaded with them. Just look around." Chablis leaned on an elbow and scanned the crowd, panning slowly from one end of the hall to the other. "What you are looking at is black society," she said. "And you know the secret about black society? The wider you are, the higher you rise in it." "But the debutantes don't all have light skin," I said. "They represent a pretty broad mix, if you ask me." "They can make debutantes in any color they want," said Chablis. "But it won't make any difference. The girls with the light skin are going to be the most successful ones, and the successful black men the girls with the light skin are going to be ones the successful black men are going to marry. It gives them status. Black may be beautiful, honey, but white is still right when it comes to getting ahead in this world, in case you didn't know. I ain't got nothing against high yellers. Their color ain't their fault, but they do tend to clan together. You ought to see them at the St. Matthew's Episcopal Church on West Broad Street. That's the black status church here in Savannah. People say they got a comb over the front door, and they won't let you in unless you can run the comb through your hair without breaking it. Inside the church, the real light-skinned people sit in the pews up front, and the darker ones sit in the back. That's right, honey, just like it used to be on the buses. You see, when it comes to prejudice, black folks are right up there with white folks, believe me. It is no big deal. But when I see black folks acting white, honey, it brings out the nigger bitch in me. A sly smile crept across Chablis' face. She peered seductively over her shoulder at me. Behave yourself, I said. Chablis ordered another apple schnapps and drank it down. We gotta stop talking now, child. It's time for the doll to go play with the boys. Chablis walked demurely onto the dance floor and tapped the shoulder of the first debutante who passed. She and the debutante exchanged polite smiles and traded places. In a moment, Chablis was nestled against the chest of her new dancing partner. I watched from the bar, my anxiety tempered somewhat by my double scotch. 5 minutes later, Chablis disentangled herself from her new partner and cut in on another young couple. She did this several times in the next half hour, working the room and rubbing up against all the best-looking young men. She took care, as she made her rounds, not to neglect the feelings of the debutantes. "Love the gown," she would say as she cut in. Chablis' mouth was moving as fast as her body. She whispered to her partners, and she gossiped with the girls. At 1 o'clock, the dancing came to an end, and a breakfast buffet was laid out. Chablis filled her plate with eggs and sausages. Then, as people began to sit down in their appointed tables, she floated around the room, looking for a place to alight. Before long, I noticed she was floating in our direction. She scooped up an empty chair from the next table and dragged it over to ours, squeezing it in between the two matrons who were sitting opposite me. They obligingly made room for her. "Oh, pardon me," she said. "Is it all right if I join you?" "Why, certainly," said one of the women. "I must tell you, you may not have been, fuck. "Why, certainly," said one of the women. "I must tell you I have not been able to take my eyes off your beautiful gown all night. Makes you look like a movie star." "Thank you," said Chablis, settling into her seat. "As a matter of fact, I wear it on stage quite a lot." "Oh, are you in the theater?" the woman asked. "Yes, I'm an actress," said Chablis. "How fascinating. What sort of acting do you do?" "Shakespeare, Broadway, lip sync. I'm based in Atlanta, but I came to Savannah tonight so I could see my cousin become a debutante." "Oh, very nice," said the woman. "Which one is she?" "Lavella." "Oh, Lavella's a lovely girl. Don't you think so, Charlotte?" "Oh, my, yes," said the other woman, nodding and smiling. "I think so, too," said Chablis, a saccharine sweetness creeping into her voice. "And she's always wanted to be a debutante, ever since I can remember." Chablis ate her food with exaggerated gentility, both pinkies raised. "Isn't that sweet?" said the woman. "Lavella's so delicate and pretty, and so intelligent. She wanted it so bad. We used to talk about being debutantes when we was kids," said Chablis. "I'm so glad she got to be one. I was afraid she wouldn't make it, though." "Well," said the woman, "I can tell you Lavella had nothing to worry about. She's a first-class young lady." "She was worried anyhow. She'd say to me, "Oh, Cousin Chablis, I'll never make it. I know I'll never make it." And I would say, "Now, listen, girl, you ain't got nothing to worry about. If Vanessa Williams can get to be Miss America, in spite of all the checking up they do at that Miss America pageant, you ought to be able to slide right by that two-bit debutante screening committee in little old Savannah." The two matrons glanced across Chablis at each other. "Besides Lavella, honey," I said, "you are always so careful to save your..." What? No. "Besides Lavella, honey," I said, "you are always so careful to save your whoring for when you come to Atlanta. No one in Savannah has a clue." The two women stared wordlessly at Chablis, who continued to eat her breakfast daintily while she talked. "I wanted to be a debutante too," she went on. "Oh yes, I really did. But like I said to Lavella, if I am going to be a debutante, let me be a real debutante. Let me be a cotillion debutante. I am serious." One of the women coughed. The other looked away from her table in desperation, as if searching the horizon for a rescue ship. "Oh, sure, Lavella," I said. "The Alpha Ball is very beautiful and glamorous, don't get me wrong. But Lavella," I said, "what are you going to do this summer when you get off of school? Huh? You going to work at the Burger King on West Broad Street, right? Well, honey, cotillion debutantes do not work at Burger King. No way, child. They take bicycle trips to France and England. I am serious. They go to Washington and work for a United States Senator who happens to be the friend of the family. They sail on the yacht and fly to a spa and lay on their asses all summer. That's what they do. That's what I want to do as a debutante." Chablis pretended not to notice the discomfort she was causing the women. She glanced at me briefly and pursed her lips, and then went right on talking. "So I said, go ahead and laugh, girl, 'cause I know you could be a cotillion debutante if I wanted to be. I'm so good at passing I can choose to be whatever I want. And if I choose to be a rich white girl, honey, that is what I will be. God knows I'm halfway there already. I have plenty of blonde hunks to play with, honey, and I'm working on having me a white baby." The women gave me pained glances, embarrassed that I, the only white person in the ballroom, should be forced to hear such talk. The temperature in the room seemed to rise by 60 degrees. I was sure my face was bright red. Suddenly Chablis put down her knife and fork. "Oh my goodness," she said. "What time is it?" She grabbed the hand of the woman next to her and looked at her watch. "1:30. My driver's been waiting for me since midnight." She glanced around the room, then pushed her chair away from the table and stood up. "Well, it's been nice meeting you," she said. "I gotta say goodbye to some folks before I go. If you ladies happen to see my chauffeur, would you tell him I'm still here and not to leave without me? Tell him we'll be taking my cousin with us. My other cousin, that is. Philip. Tell him Philip and me ain't finished disturbing the peace yet. He'll know what that means." "Why, yes, certainly," one of the women mumbled. "And you won't have any trouble spotting my chauffeur," said Chablis, casting a glance my way. "He's white." Then she set off around the room, table hopping and slipping her telephone number to several of the boys. Now, I figured, was a good time for me to leave. Quickly, I nodded goodbye to my table mates and headed towards the door, giving Chablis a wide berth. I knew that if she saw me, she would draw me into whatever stunt she was about to pull. I approached Dr. Collier and hurriedly thanked him for inviting me. Dr. Collier did not sense the urgency of my departure and introduced me to the man standing next to him, the man who had taught the debutantes how to dance the minuet. I smiled and uttered pleasantries, but barely heard a word that either of the two of them were saying. My eyes were darting around the room for signs of Chablis. When at last it was possible to take my leave, I withdrew, ducked around the bar, slipped through the ballroom doors, and bounded down the escalator 2 stairs at a time. I managed to make it across the lobby without incident, and dashed out the front door into a calm, untroubled misty night on Bay Street.